and welcome back for another episode of this season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritsen. So update on training this week. Had a bit of freedom. My coach basically said, get in a couple swims, a couple runs, and a few bikes. So I kind of had some freedom as far as what I wanted to do. And that overall went fairly well. Did get back in the pool, which is just the same thing I always say. It's hard to get up that early in the morning. And yeah, it's nothing, to proclaim about. It's just sort of training as training goes. Luckily, I am actually being able to train again. I'm not having this major body resistance to training. So that's been nice to start getting the sense of we're getting back into the swing of things. And on Friday and Saturday coming up, we'll talk about this, I think, on the next podcast. I have a event called Hood to Coast coming up. I think I've talked about it on this podcast and these episodes a bit, the previous ones. But it's a relay run with 2 vans of people. And so one van starts up at Mount Hood in Oregon, and then van 2 comes up after van 1's done, and I'm in van 2. And then you just alternate your way. And I think there's 6 people in each van or something close to that. And yeah, you run your stint, and then you hop in the van and you spend probably a good amount of time of the next the next 24 hours in running and then in a van. So, and then you run all the way to the Oregon coast. So I think I have one of the harder runs, which is going to be hilarious. But I don't have to swim, and I also don't have to bike beforehand either. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. The weather is supposed to be, I think, fairly decent. It's actually been cold here in Oregon, which has actually been really nice. It's been a nice reprieve from the heat. So I'm hoping that the weather report for about 80s or so remains true. I would rather not run in hot weather again. So we'll see how that goes. But that's all that's coming up so far. So today, for the main part of this episode, I wanted to have a little chat, a little conversation about how sport has helped me through this year. I've spent some time reflecting on the past year and going through, I think I've seen just this last month, I've seen an increase in stress again, even though it's almost been like over the last year, maybe I would have rated my stress levels at a 2 or 3 out of 10, but now they might've been more of a constant 4 or 5 out of 10. And then in the past week, maybe more like a 6 or 7. And I feel like collectively I've seen that more and more. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today, because in my reflections, and I'll talk about this in a bit, I've realized that sport has played a role this year, and training has played a role that has significantly helped me get through the year. So here's a couple of stats that I pulled from the CDC's website. Mental health is up 3 times, issues, I guess, concerns with mental health is up 3 times what it was prior to 2020. In 2019, 1 in 10 adults reported either having symptoms of anxiety or being diagnosed with anxiety disorder. In 2020 and in 2021, that's now up to about 4 in 10 adults, which I wouldn't be surprised if it's maybe a little bit higher than that. The thing is that what I'm seeing in my office, which is why I want to talk about this today, is I'm seeing the reflection of that. Since the beginning of this year, people are coming into my office with all sorts of symptoms. They range, and they definitely have quite a range of causes, and many of which they had prior to 2019, and they've been dealing with this now for years. Most people come to me and they've been dealing with certain things for 2 to 5 years, sometimes 10 years. But many of them, I would say maybe half I would think I could confidently say maybe half either have a new symptom that popped up or had a worsening of symptoms begin just in the last 7 to 9 months, like starting around January, February. There's been a significant number of people who've had something new pop up then. And that's on top of whatever else it was that they were coming in for. And I would say that 4 out of 10 number being people having some type of symptoms of anxiety or anxiety disorder is a fairly accurate number of how many have noticed that they are overwhelmed. I've even had some come in and say, I just feel like I've been so emotional and I feel like I need to get a hormone panel run and I need to do all these things. And I kind of hesitate and I start talking with them and they're like, well, I don't really feel like I'm all that stressed, or I don't really feel like I'm having, those whatever. When I'm in a conversation and it's random, just sometimes I feel like I could just randomly start crying, and I stop and I say, okay, let's talk about that. And throughout the course, it's not that I'm leading them in any way, but I just start asking questions. And as they continue talking about it, they've come to realize that stress is there, and a little bit more than usual. And they finally start to come around and see that, maybe this year has been affecting me more than I've been realizing. And I think that awareness is the place where then we can start to move forward, right? Everybody wants to blame the hormones. Everybody wants to blame all these things when sometimes we just need to actually call it what it is. So just over the past month, even, we've been seeing this over 2020, 2021, and I promise this is about triathlon, so stick with me here. But just over the past month, I've seen signs of stress and anxiousness increase. I think it's partially because kids are going back to school and people are starting to get a little bit worried about certain things that seem to be increasing in many ways. And we've seen in just many areas where it's causing some anxiety for both kids and also for adults, and also adults because of their kids, right? So what are some of the signs of anxiety and depression? Like, what am I talking about here? These can be and range anywhere from mental and physical symptoms. Sometimes you might see them as just feeling more irritable than normal, noticing maybe more anger outbursts, or just easier getting, to that point of being irritable or angry. You can also see this as fatigue, and also maybe even just lack. So I don't want to say lack of motivation, because sometimes it's not motivation that is what is needed. It's discipline. But fatigue is in like, you just don't want to do the things. You just don't want to show up. And it's more than just not wanting to do it. It's this, feeling like you could probably go to bed and stay in bed for 12 to 14 to 16 hours, maybe even nap, and just having some difficulty getting things done during the day. Muscle pain and digestive symptoms sometimes can be a sign of anxiousness and worry and nervousness. Those can definitely start to affect your stomach for sure. And then that can also lead to other issues with your gut. And I think we've touched on that before, but the vagus nerve is something that is a direct communication between your gut and your brain. And so if we're experiencing anxiety, sometimes that can be a result of issues within the GI tract itself, and an imbalance there. But then sometimes that can also be, it's kind of like chasing the chicken or the egg, in that sense that sometimes something that's going on in the brain, we also can see in the GI tract, and it's hard to identify what's causing what, but they're both connected. And so treating one can help treat the other. Also, difficulty sleeping. Sometimes that shows up as insomnia. Those can also be signs of anxiety or depression. Anxiety, on the other hand, though, like those are the two together, but anxiety, on the other hand, is actually defined by persistent, excessive worries that don't go away, even the absence of a stressor. And I think obviously this last year, we've had many reasons many different stressors, certainly. But some of those stressors have been lifted and people are still experiencing those feelings of anxiousness and they're still having overwhelm. And I'm just not seeing it be addressed as much as I think that it really should be. And I really think that we ought to be talking about it more because it is affecting people. And races are starting to happen again. Obviously, I've had several races this year, which has been really nice. And so it's a little different, obviously this year than it was last year. And it seems like things are getting better. But just recently, Kona was moved to February, which they did back in 2020, saying it would happen in February of 2021. And then they canceled it altogether. And it's hard. It's hard not to almost feel like we're headed back into an episode of deja vu, right? Like, I think we've been here before. Like, this is oddly familiar. And even though races are happening, it's clear that we're still very much so in the thickets and we haven't really made it out yet. And I know you know this, and I know you feel this. As I said, I mean, I've literally watched as this almost like cloud has descended over people, especially this last month. Stress has increased again. And I have watched as symptoms have literally increased with it. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I was reflecting on this a bit. And I was wondering why I felt a little bit differently. It's not that I haven't been stressed. As I certainly have been. I run my own practice. And then I also had a lot of my events canceled last year. And so I had a period of time where I wasn't allowed to practice. And, keeping some form of income is difficult when you're not able to practice. And I know that we have seen a lot of people lose their jobs in the past year. And that's all stressful, right? And also, I mean, I recognize too that I'm a fairly empathetic person, and I often feel the pain and stress around me, and I think it's part of why I do what I do. Kind of the idea behind like if I can help one person improve how they feel day to day, then it's all worth it, right? Well, what I was reflecting on though was that even though it literally sucked to have races postponed, it also kept me busy. I certainly had, I mean, and I mean this in this way, like I certainly had time to reflect, right, and address issues that came up when they did. And I do think that's really important, right? Like, as I mentioned, awareness is key because once you become aware, then you have a choice. You have a choice either to stay in that place or you have a choice to move forward, to either make changes with your habits, to acknowledge it for what it is and either just move on, or you can choose also to stay there in that place and stick with it. But if you don't bring awareness to something, then it's kind of like there's just this constant question and you may just go on with the same problems with no answers, right? But what I kind of came to realize is that in this process of kind of reflecting on the last year, I did when things came up and it really started to bother me, I did take the time to address it. And I would say like a meditation practice is probably one of the things that saved me the most this year. Beyond, I mean, as far as just from like a mental standpoint of things. But the thing that I think helped the most out of all of it was that training itself kept me focused. It kept me busy, but it kept me focused, right? It kept me focused on the other side, kept me focused on a goal. The path to the goal might not have been linear, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have seen those, or you folks have seen all of those different types of, or there's like an image that goes around that's like A and B, and there's a line from A to B, and then there's a line that goes around in a circle and all over the place and around and then finally gets to B. I think in many ways, we always think that like our health goals or health journeys and our journeys to our goal, whatever that might look like, is going to be linear, and it is never linear ever, right? There's always setbacks. There's always like, I think I've been here before and I'm literally back. It feels like you're back at the beginning, but finally you do end up getting to B and you're like, well, that was not what I expected it to be. And those paths of those goals just never are linear, but you have somewhere that you wanted to get to, right? And I think a piece of this, and what I'm trying to basically say here, is that Coeur d'Alene, my race in Coeur d'Alene happened. My race at Salem happened, right? But it's so much, I mean, those days were epic days. And I'm so, like, I really did get quite an experience out of both of them. But the journey it's just so much more about the journey than it really is about the day. The day is one day. The journey is potentially 365 days, right? Or it could be 2 years, or it could be 3. So I think the idea is that the goal itself kept me focused, and that ultimately helped me get through this journey, I think, in some ways a little bit more intact. And this is one of the best things that I think I have found with sport. And I think it's why sport has always been a part of my life. There are lessons that we learn through sport that translate into life. It's never separate, right? Sport is part of living, or at least it can be, if it has been a part of your life, or if you're just starting to incorporate it into your life. It really can be just a part of life, but it also has lessons from life can translate to sport. But the things that we learn when we are engaging in sport can also be lessons that are translated back into life, right? And for me this year, beyond seeing so many possibilities of where triathlon can lead, because I've got goals, let me tell you, it provided also a really huge benefit, which was helping to keep my mental, emotional, and physical self together, right? Like, I think in many ways, I am here today. And also this podcast in many ways has helped me keep focused on the goal. It's helped me take some of the information that I'm learning and process it, so that not only do I get to share and teach it, but it's through my learning that has also helped me stay focused. And I think being able to teach is something that's it's an honor to be able to do. But it's also very neat when you get to hear, somebody benefited from listening to an episode, or, some of you sometimes pop into my social media and let me know that I know a couple of you let me know that the podcast about recovery and why it takes so long after an Ironman or half was really impactful, as well as you had some follow-up questions on some of the pre-race nutrition as well. So it's nice to see that a little community is actually starting to form based off of these episodes. And that is, again, I think is another piece, right, of where sport and triathlon and just having something in common throughout this year has brought people together, and also is hopefully helping us collectively get through this a little bit, and we'll be out on the other side a little bit stronger. I know also, though, through those of you that do listen to this podcast, that you have also come into my social media area and let me know that you've seen yourself through sport overcome anxiety. I know some of you, especially, and some in my practice as well, have overcome certain health ailments like GI distress, also eating disorders and trauma, injury, illness. I mean, there's so many things that people have overcome through sport. And I know that we've talked about, and I hear about on this I know we've talked about on this podcast, but I also hear, because I listen to all sorts of different doctors and podcasts, that there are so many things that we want to avoid, as sport can sometimes encourage or lead to them, right? Like I'm talking about RED-S, so like relative energy deficiency in sport is sometimes a product of sport, but it's oftentimes because you're not eating enough food, right? So it's like a little bit of both. And there's also, other things that we don't want to become too. There can be anxiety that comes through sport, right? But there's also a side, so there's many different examples of that, but there's also a side where sport plays an intricate role in helping people overcome areas in their life where they have suffered, right? And this year, I think we've also seen many people thrive. So, I mean, for example, right? So we've seen some incredible performances. I could name several. We could name Daniela Riff, who did amazingly at Ironman St. George, the half Ironman. We also saw an incredible performance from Lionel Sanders and Sam Long at that same event. And we saw some just incredible performances there. We've also seen just this last weekend, incredible performances like Cameron Wurf with a 7:46 at Ironman Denmark Copenhagen this weekend. It's a new course record. Some athletes are coming out of this time with some huge numbers and some huge performances. So I wanted to at least, and there's so many others that I've been following that have just, they've just blown me away with their performances. The Norseman Tri was a couple weekends ago, I think at this point. And the male athlete that won did it in 10 hours and the female was in 12 hours. And that is a sport that covers, or that's a course that covers 5,000 meters of elevation gain. To put that in perspective, 5,000 meters, for those of you that live in the United States, like me. Ironman Coeur d'Alene, the bike course itself, the 112 miles was 5,000 feet of elevation gain. The 5,000 meters is 3 times that. And that's from the bike through the run, right? So it's not just the bike, but it's the whole course, because you basically start in the water off of a ferry, you jump into a fjord and swim to the shore, and then you basically bike and run up a hill and you somewhat summit a mountain at the top. I digress, because this is one of the things that I've always wanted to do. And I know that I mentioned it to my coach last year. I was like, so this might be something I'd like to do, which means I want to do it, but it sometimes can be hard to get into. Anyways, I digress. But the point is that what I wanted to at least acknowledge is that sport can have so many benefits, so many positive benefits, even through, and especially through, right, like the worst of times. So stay with me, because we'll be right back with more after this. So from a health standpoint, let's talk about some of the benefits of exercise on anxiety. First off, this is from several studies that I sort of just collected across the board. There's many different benefits as far as exercise on anxiety, but one is that, as I've been talking about, right, engaging in exercise often takes your mind off, or it can distract you in some ways from the things that you're anxious about. It gives you something to kind of put your energy towards, and it can take your mind off of what might be causing some of that anxiety. Moving your body also tends to decrease tension in your joints and in your muscles. And then that even sometimes can lower your body's experience of anxiety. Think about it this way. If you look at people, I talk about this all the time, you see I call it the shoulder creep. So it's weird. If you watch somebody start to get stressed, like, you can literally see their shoulders start to creep up towards their ears. And one of the things that can be really helpful in those times is to relax your shoulders down and relax your jaw, and then practice, instead of breathing into your shoulders, so doing, shoulder breathing, to breathe into your belly. So you with your breaths in, your belly goes out, you fill up your abdomen, and then when you breathe out, your breath goes, your abdomen goes in back towards your spine. And that can actually help to decrease muscle tension. It can help it just can help lower your feelings of anxiousness or anxiety or stress, just by doing that. Also, because exercise can build your heart rate, and it can bring that up, it does have an impact and can change the chemistry in your brain, right? So it can help increase the availability of certain types of hormones, neurotransmitters, including serotonin, but also GABA. And each of those play a different role in how your body and your brain experience both anxiety, happiness, also being able to calm down. Also, exercise activates certain areas in your brain, particularly the frontal region, and that can be basically what the frontal cortex does is it helps with what we call executive function. So part of that is mapping things out, being able to make choices. You might call it the computer brain. It's kind of like the logical brain where we are able to kind of reason things out, but it's slow. The executive brain can help control the amygdala, which is the emotional center. And I've heard this called the chimp brain. I picked that up from, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget, but oh shoot, I want to give them the right credit for this one. Leslie Marshall is the athlete. And the book is called The Brave Athlete. So you can look that up there. But it's also written by her husband is a psychologist, and a really, really good one, a really good sports psychologist. Anyway, they nicknamed the kind of prefrontal and frontal cortex, the computer brain, as I mentioned. And then they also they named the amygdala as the chimp brain. And essentially what happens is when that chimp brain kind of gets activated, it's the amygdala centers, and it just goes because it's part of what keeps you alive. And those are its primary responsibilities. And that can sometimes overpower the executive brain or the frontal and prefrontal cortex. So, but if exercise can start to activate that frontal region of the brain, and then that can help to control the amygdala a little bit, or that chimp brain, right? So, and I'll also say the reason why I said the amygdala or that chimp brain keeps us alive is because it's and I mean that actually quite literally. The amygdala is our reacting system to basically either real or imagined threats. Okay, to our survival. So that means your amygdala is your fight or flight response. Are you going to stay and you're going to fight the lion, or are you going to run? And again, this is also why I mentioned real or imagined threats, is because you might be facing a lion, or you might be facing a pandemic, for example, which is why this one in particular is so difficult, is because it's constant. It's almost the same as when people sit in front of computers and are stressed at their jobs, which is technically an imagined threat, right? But it still is triggering this stress response, and it's still triggering the amygdala. So you're kind of living in this constantly engaged, constant fight or flight response. And that is ultimately what can cause issues in the body. So anyway, exercise helps to mitigate that a little bit and to control that a little bit better. Exercising also regularly builds up resources that bolster resilience against stormy emotions. And that one, I basically mean, it just helps a little bit with, like, if you've ever felt like you're built up with anger, if you've ever felt like you were just either anger or sad or any type of emotion that just is like kind of just filling you up, if you go and just go for a run or just get your heart rate up and get some movement in, oftentimes by the end of it, you're thinking a little more clearly. Some of these points, as I mentioned, I pulled from a bunch of different studies, and you can find a list of them also on a article from Harvard Health. So you can find those usually there if you wanted to go back and relook at those. But all of that being said, I'm not just here to just talk about the things. I also want to give you some things that I think would be helpful. So here's a few things. One thing that I think helped my mindset the most was Matt Dixon's episode on Evolving and Adapting, and it's on his Purple Patch podcast. He has a few episodes in the spring of 2020 that you can go back and listen to that really helped me stay focused. They're worth going back to because it feels as if like we're kind of headed back to where we were in 2020, to me at least. I mean, we might not be, but that's what it sort of feels like. And the main lesson that I learned from those episodes was that, first off, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset. And it was nice to just hear that again, right? Like yeah. Anyway, so nice to hear it again. Also, what he did say is to take a moment to be frustrated and feel those emotions. Like, don't just sweep them under the rug and just expect that they won't pop up at a later time. Deal with them when they happen. But at some point, you need to come out of that and be ready to come out on the other side stronger. And so he basically was talking about evolve, adapt, be willing to do the things that it takes to get through this and be stronger on the other side of this. So the question, and that has been a focus of mine, I think, since then. The question I ask you and myself is, what habits or routines will actually help you to do that? And every time I feel like I get lost, this is the question I come back to. What are the habits and routines that will help you get to that goal that you're trying to get to? So here's a few examples. 1, take up a new hobby and schedule time to do it. Or maybe it's picking up an old hobby that used to make you happy, but has gotten lost in the mix of things. Another thing that can be helpful, and this is these are examples as far as like just helping to create some balance. This isn't just specific to sport. This is helping with just overall life stress, doing things that you enjoy. That's a big piece. And that's why I bring up hobbies, spending time outside, booking time to go for a hike, find a friend that likes to go hiking and schedule a time to go with them. Pick a few hikes that you haven't done or a few areas you want to explore that you haven't done yet. Or maybe you have a favorite. Maybe it's time to schedule some time to go there. Another one is setting an alarm to go to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every single morning. That has the biggest impact on your hormones in the sense of cortisol, melatonin, and those kind of diurnal patterns, which will help to, it's been seen and shown in studies over and over and over again that you can really help with overall hormone balance and also just health in general by going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. Another example would be less screen time, and that includes social media. I know that that's been a source of a lot of stress for a lot of people. So let's see that as it is and maybe not allow our amygdala to get all caught up and activate our chimp brain on the comment streams. Maybe just avoid those in general. Another one is schedule time for training or the gym. If you're struggling, I recommend finding a friend to do it with you, and not the one that will say to your resistance, oh, it's okay. If we don't go today, let's just go get drinks instead. That's not the friend. That is not the friend. That friend is awesome for certain times, but that's not the friend that will help you get to the gym. You want the one friend that goes to the gym consistently and will be there at 5 a.m. to pick you up for swim practice. And you better be ready, right? That's the one that I mean. Another one is to identify if something has turned into a coping mechanism. An example of this could be there's no shame. There's no shame here in any of these. Okay. I've listed out a couple of things. And any one of these, don't go down that road. Just recognize it as a coping mechanism if that is what it is for you. And let's see if there's some things that we can do to help. Maybe put exercise there, or maybe put either a different coping mechanism, or maybe you might want to go see somebody that can help you actually work through the emotions that you're needing help coping through, right? Again, going back to that awareness so that then we can make progress forward. Let's be aware of our choices and be aware of what's going on. And maybe we just need to either find a different way of handling stress or whatever emotion it is that you're feeling. And counselors can often be very helpful for that. But some coping mechanisms can be TV, can be social media, could be food, could be alcohol, drugs, medications. Is there something that you can do to help that not be a coping mechanism? And be wary of inserting one different coping mechanism for another. But one example might be maybe not buying the package of Oreos and having that at home, or not keeping alcohol in the house. Maybe putting a timer on social media on your phone, so you only have 15 minutes allowed per day. Maybe getting rid of cable. That's an interesting one. There's no shame around coping mechanisms. But as I said, if you are finding that you are spending a lot of time coping with things that may not be serving you well, it might be worth recognizing that for what it is and seeking out some help for that. Or make your choice, either stay there or move forward. There's also, and this is the last one, but there's no shame. And this one, I'm going to say this again. There's no shame around food, but I will say one thing here. The type of food you eat does matter. There are not good or bad foods, and I won't label them as such, but there are foods that do have an impact on how your body functions. I know we've talked about this before, and I know you know it. It's very tempting, and we all default to comfort foods when we're stressed. And if you don't, well, that's good for you. But many of us do. Okay. Again, there's no judgment. I'm in this boat as well. But except that in times of stress, what our body really needs, and this is what I remind myself of a lot, is that when your body is stressed, or when it's sick, or when it's injured, what our body really needs is food that gives us the nutrients it needs to survive, right? And to not just to survive, but also to thrive. It's to heal and to, boost that immune system and all those things. But that's also often the opposite of what we want. Isn't that interesting though? So think, I'm going to throw ice cream under the bus. Don't don't get mad at me. Think ice cream versus veggies, right? Which one do you think most people are going to go towards when they're feeling overwhelmed? Is it going to be making a meal, a stir-fry meal, or is it going to be going to the easiest thing and going to the cupboard or the freezer and grabbing something that maybe is just packed full of sugar or something else? I think you both know and also get the point that I'm trying to make. So if you need some support here, here's my suggestions. Instead of going all or nothing, so it can be helpful to not have it in the house, right? That's one way that makes things very easy to not do them. But there's also another scenario. So what if we prepped our lunches for the week on a Sunday? That might take an hour tops, right? And at the same time, let's also make a little treat. So maybe a favorite muffin, maybe a cookie. And that's the treat and reward for prepping your food for the week. So you wrap that up in your little tin foil, and that goes with all your lunches that you've prepped, and you've put them in the fridge, and they're all nice and pretty, and it's exciting because they're ready to go. You've got them for the week, and it's just going to make things really easy. And then that's the reward. So now, after eating lunch every day, and this is where I start to get excited because it's just about hacking habits, right? Now, when you are eating lunch each day, you get a little treat with your meal. So not only are you eating food that's going to help you perform better and also support your health and also support your body through a stressful time, but you're also getting a little mini reward for doing the thing, right? You'll be more likely to do it next Sunday because of this. And then that cycle just keeps on going on, right? You keep prepping your meals, you maybe do a little treat for afterwards, and progressively over the weeks, your choices get better and better and better. Just some food for thought. And that's our episode for now. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels, and make sure to share this episode with anyone you think may love it. And it would also be so amazing if you would like this show, give us a rating and a review. It helps us get this show out to more people. You can also follow me at Dr. Kirstin on Facebook and Instagram, and drkirstin.com. If you'd like to reach us with any comments or questions, you can either find either of us, Wisp Sports or Dr. Kirstin, on Facebook or Instagram and reach out with the message, or you can email info@wispsports.com. And we'll see you. Thank you for listening. And we will be back next week with a Hood to Coast review. So that'll be fun. We'll get to go over all of the race day funsies. Okay. Have a great week and take care.